Initiating moisture.
Morbius is absolutely miserable. I can completely confirm that everything you've heard about it is absolutely true, and it's even worse than you're probably thinking it is. It's not so bad that it's entertaining like I expected it to be. It is mind-numbingly boring. It was agonizing. I was in a constant struggle to stay awake for the movie. I cannot believe that they even bothered to release this. They should have just scrapped it and said it got stolen in a burglary or something. It should not have gone to theaters. When watching Morbius, I felt like I time traveled back to 2004 when almost every superhero movie was trash, like Elektra and all that. That's what this movie felt like. I feel like at some point along the way there was an idea for Morbius, and then they overdosed on Xanax and then produced this. It is, in all aspects, lackluster. Top to bottom. There is almost nothing redeeming about this movie. But Jared Leto made history. Not with like a great performance here or anything, but he now has one of the worst DC movies ever made with Suicide Squad 2016, and now one of the worst Marvel-based movies ever made with Morbius. This is crazy how hard this one missed the mark. So let's just go ahead and get started talking about the movie. Let's get after it. Let's get a little stinky in the cesspool. The story, it's trash. It's the most predictable superhero plot I think I've heard since the creation of the MCU. There is no attempt here to make a compelling narrative whatsoever. Everything you think is going to happen in this movie happens. If you watch the trailer to this movie, you probably already know everything that's going to happen in this movie with the characters. It's just a complete throwaway. There was no effort there whatsoever. It's like they had an AI write this plot after the AI sat down to watch 3 superhero films from the late 90s. It didn't try, didn't bother. So, not a whole lot to say there, just wasteful. I will say, though, that this movie feels like it was supposed to be completely different than what we got. It feels like all of the editing really betrayed it. Not that I think there's some Snyder cut version out there that's going to somehow save this absolute abominable septic tank explosion. But it definitely feels like it was changed drastically from the editing with a lot of shit removed. Because it moves so quickly all the time when it comes to exposition. It gives you so much info in the fastest time possible with this absolutely ballistic speed run of vomit of information. And then things will just happen for no reason. Like, things will just happen with nothing that really got you there or made you care about it. There's not a single character in this movie that you will give a fuck about. The characters don't seem to give a shit about themselves either. Like, one of the main detectives, every time he's on screen, he's like, oh my god, more dead bodies. Oh my god, dead cops in my city? Not now. Why would he do that? And then at the very end of the movie, I'm gonna try and avoid spoilers, but this movie fucking sucks. I'll give you a spoiler warning if I get into it. This might be a minor spoiler. At the end of the movie, there's a bunch of bats that fly out of the ground, and the cops are looking down, they're like, oh, bats. Except for one of the cops, like the main one. The bats are going up, and he just looks at him angry. He's like, He just stares him down. He's like, And that's it. Like, none of the characters have any variety of emotions to them. They're all just like fucking robots. Except for Jared Leto, admittedly, he kind of tries as Morbius. There's times where he, like, gives an attempt at acting. Like, he wasn't horrible in the role. It's just everything about it was bad in general, but it's not because his acting was super turbo shitty or anything. It's just they didn't try anywhere in this film. So yeah, again, I think a lot of what's going to be really confusing to people is because of the editing, where things are happening for no reason, or things are happening like off screen, it feels like, that you just have to accept. It's just bad. Everything about the story, as well as the way that it's edited, is terrible. Absolutely terrible. And let's get to the most offensive part about this movie, is the fighting. The fighting is so disorienting. Anytime there's a fight, it's obviously all CGI, but they do it in a way that obstructs your view entirely. So when Morbius is fighting someone, it's just like a bunch of like smoke and tendrils and like shit flying off of him, a bunch of like really dark particles that obstruct your view. So half the time you don't even know what he did. And when he's fighting the villain, who is horrible, the villain is absolutely nonsensically trash. When those two collide, it's like action figures being blasted together in pure pitch black. Like, you can hear things happening, but you can't see it, because both of them have just a bunch of, like, dark debris flying off of them, so you can't tell what is actually going on screen in a fight. It is disorienting and just genuinely confusing in all aspects. So you're praying that you don't have to see a fight because it just hurts your eyes. It's just bad. Like, it's bad CGI. It's bad everything. Literally everything is not good. I don't know why they even bothered to release the film. They should have just got rid of it. Like, just have some shame. Be like, you know what? This is a net loss, but at least we can save our reputations going further. It just wasn't worth it. I do think this movie was supposed to be R-rated, because in some of the scenes, like when Morbius slashes someone, or what I assume is a slash, because what he does is he like cranks his hand for a slap, and then fucking 1,000 pieces of debris and pixels fly off of him, and you're supposed to, you know, connect the dots that he just slapped or slashed the guy. And then you'll hear a bunch of blood sound effects, like as if their throat just got slashed, but none of it's on screen. There's no, like, blood on screen or anything, so you're never really sure, but I'm assuming there was supposed to be blood and gore. And there are times where there is, like, some blood here and there, so you get, like, the general idea, but I have the feeling, based on the sound effects and the way that it's presented, it was supposed to be a lot more violent and show a lot more blood. But in an effort to keep it PG-13, they decided against it last minute, but they didn't change anything about the scenes, so it's all just a mess. Morbius is horrible. The movie's really, really bad. If I had to fish for one compliment, I would say at least it's not long. Like, at the very least, the movie's short, and the theater is probably empty. My showing had like 8 people in there, and I didn't even see them when I walked in, so they might have just decided not to go last minute, which is probably the right call to make. That's really like the only 2 things I can find to even say almost nice things about. And then there is one cop, like the cop's partner, who has a lot of speaking roles, and I didn't mind him. It looks like he put a lot of effort into his acting. I'm not sure what the actor's name is, or even what the character's name was in the movie. But there was a scene where he like brought holy water to the investigation, and he was charismatic. I liked him. But yeah, that's about it. Plugging Morbius into the moist meter, I'm giving it a 15%. Even that feels a little high, because it's not entertainingly bad, it's really boring bad. Now I feel like I have to justify why I gave it a 15% and not lower, and I think it's because I like some of the ideas. I think Morbius could have been a cool movie conceptually, but this one was just executed so poorly. There's a couple of things in the film, and again, I'm not trying to get too deep into spoilers, that I think could have worked really well if it wasn't this movie that tried them. So I do like a couple of things that it wanted to do, it just didn't do them well. But anyway, that's about it. See ya.
This episode of Moist Meter brought to you by Godslap Issue 2. Go to godslapbook.com to order your copy now.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. You can probably hear the jubilation in my voice. I'm very excited to talk about this. In fact, it might even be spoilers on how I feel about the film entirely. Bored. This is one of the few Marvel movies that actually has pretty suboptimal reception. I think it has like a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that I put any real stock into Rotten Tomatoes scores, considering they continue to give Big Mouth 100% every season. It's an absolute mockery of reviews, to be honest. But it's just one of those rare instances where even Marvel fans are like, yeah, this is kind of underwhelming and mid, which it is. I guess I can't say the movie's bad, per se. Ant-Man and the Wasp is bad. That is still perhaps the weakest MCU film in my opinion. This isn't as bad as Ant-Man and the Wasp. It is better than that, but it's not good either. It exists in that unbearable purgatory where it's neither bad nor good, and it's just on that line of being boring. Like, I walked out of the theater and then I played basketball and completely forgot I'd ever even watched the movie in the first place. I had to be reminded that I saw it. Like, recalling anything meaningful that happens in this film is like trying to remember a mediocre dream. There's only one thing that actually shines in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and it's Kang. Kang the Conqueror is a very cool character, and he is very cool in this film, but he's really the only one. everything that happens here just feels so flat and bland. It tries to follow the Marvel formula to the point where it almost becomes like a parody of itself. It's constantly shoehorning really lazy jokes that don't hit the mark constantly. And speaking of jokes, let's talk about MODOK. He's not really a villain in this movie, he's just a punching bag for people to laugh at. He's not menacing, he's not intimidating, he does nothing except get literally made fun of by every character in the film. That's his whole role. He's just this embarrassing presence that they constantly poke fun at. Like, and he looks like shit, too. Like, the CGI on him is awful. I saw a post comparing MODOK from this movie to George Lopez as Mr. Electric in 2005's Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and George Lopez as Mr. Electric looks better. Like, MODOK here is awful. Genuinely fucking horrible. I don't know a whole lot about MODOK. I don't know if he's supposed to just be like this sponge that just absorbs insults from characters forever, but I feel like he was supposed to be like the right-hand man to Kang that was, you know, this expert killer villain, but he's not here. He does nothing except get made fun of. I've said this before, and it's applicable here as well. If the characters aren't taking anything seriously, if everything about the situations they're in is played off as a joke, then why are the spectators supposed to care? At that point, it's just kind of a sitcom. This movie's supposed to be the kickoff for Phase 5, I believe, and man, what a weak start. This is the equivalent of, like, starting a basketball game and scoring on your own hoop. Like, this is just kind of lame, honestly. I also would like to talk about the visuals quickly because I really like the Quantumania style of just, like, goofy, wacky shit happening. Like, a lot of the tech is all oozy and gooey to pilot a weird technological ship. You have to fucking double fist the controls and then steer the goo. Like, I like that kind of shit. But there's a lot of times in this film where it was just noticeably bad. And it's not because the VFX department isn't talented, it's because they're clearly overworked. There's a lot of fatigue in the VFX department because of how much they're constantly having to churn out, I feel. Like, I believe over the last few years, you can see a real steady decline in the quality of the visuals. Like, need I remind you of Thor: Love and Thunder, when they're, like, transmitting that kid's face, and it looks like an actual Power Rangers moment? Like, there is very clear signs that the VFX team just needs a little more time to flesh it out better so it looks better. Because, goddamn. That it does happen quite a few times in this film. It's not nearly as bad as like in Thor: Love and Thunder with the scene I mentioned, but there are moments where I was like, ugh, that did not look very good. But overall, I appreciate the style they were going for. And now let's get to the story here. I'm not going to be getting into spoilers, though I would really like to help illustrate my major complaints with the narrative here, but I'll just give like the general broad strokes. So after being sucked into the quantum realm, the team gets split up. And Scott and his daughter end up meeting some of the quantum locals. And they are fucking worthless. The locals are fighting back against Kang, but they have no real role to play in this film, other than to serve as cannon fodder for Kang to murder to show that he's not a nice guy. They don't do anything to further the plot. There's like a whole breakout moment with like one of the leaders of the resistance, but that leads to nothing. All they do is like rush Kang to die. They were just entirely useless to the plot of the film. And really, the heroes don't have too much of a struggle. Pretty much all of their plans go really, really well. Like, almost perfect up until the very end. But everything's just super easy up until then, really. And then, I can't get into spoilers. There's a lot I want to say, but a lot of it's spoiler-related. Overall, I just felt the whole movie was super weak. For a lot of different reasons, both from its visuals, especially from its narrative and the directions that it goes, or the directions it doesn't go, where it should have, where it made a lot of sense to. Like, there's just a lot of choices they've made here that make this a really weak kickoff for Phase 5. There's one other thing I'd like to mention. All of the action scenes in this movie, except for the end, and even a little bit at the end, to be honest, has like this shaky cam effect, which is nauseating. They did a really awful job with a lot of the action sequences. I'm just gonna say it. Like, they keep killing these Kang henchmen, and killing's the wrong word. Basically, they just one-tap them with punches. It's not even like actual choreographed action at all until the very end, but they keep one-tapping all of the Kang henchmen, or one-tapping them with a spear that blows them up. And what happens is, like, as the impact's coming, the camera will, like, fucking jolt around and shake a little bit, and it looks horrible. I don't know how they regressed on action filming. Like, MCU's been doing a decent job over the last few years of, like, actually showing you action when it's happening. This one took it fucking 15 steps back. I thought most of the action in this film was really poorly done. So yeah, anyway, plugging Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania into the Moist meter, I'm giving it a 50%. It's not a bad movie, but it's not a good one either, which ends up making it even more miserable. I'd prefer if the movie was just, like, enjoyably bad, like stupid, silly bad, as opposed to just being stuck in between decent and bad. It just became forgettable and mediocre. And yeah, that's really about it. Godslap is a comic book series we've been working on for a couple years now. It's a hyper-violent, over-the-top sci-fi story about the beauty and destruction that slaps can cause. Issue 2 is out right now. It'd make a wonderful Christmas gift, so make sure to check it out at godslapbook.com. Right now we also have 3 variant covers that are in stock, but the second those sell out, those variant covers will never be restocked, so definitely make sure to pick up a copy today.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Let's just go ahead and get right into it. So, this movie obviously had a very tough development with the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman. I believe they had completely finished the script for Wakanda Forever, and then his passing occurred, so they had to rewrite everything, obviously. And I think they handled it very respectfully, and it's very smart how they did it in-universe. The characters in the film are mourning the loss of King T'Challa and trying to figure out what they're going to do going forward to protect Wakanda now that the Black Panther's no longer around to keep them safe. And I just think overall that was the right way of handling the situation in the universe there. So it worked very well for the film, but overall, I just didn't like this movie as much as the first one, and that's not only because of, you know, the loss of Chadwick Boseman. Of course, no one's ever going to be able to play that role as well as he did, so that you can't hold that against the film. Outside of that, there's just a lot in this movie that doesn't work super well, even though there are, like, objectively better components to it. Like, the CGI is significantly improved. They did a much better job with the CGI in this film compared to the first one. The second half of Black Panther with, like, that, you know, very cinematic finale fight had really wonky CGI. Here, they cleaned most of that up to the point where, like, even the underwater shit looked pretty beautiful. And I also think they did a better job with the action sequences in this one. They're a lot more hype and they go a lot harder. Like, this shit'll reach out and slap you in your seat. They did much better with the action here. But even with these upgrades, I just don't feel like it excelled at everything that it wanted to achieve. The movie's at its best when the characters, you can feel the emotion behind them. There's very good writing for a lot of these characters, and the acting is outstanding. So when they're delivering these really emotionally charged monologues and these emotionally charged moments, it hits, and they've done a great job with that. But they also weave in, like, very generic Marvel formula stuff. Like, I just feel like overall there's a lot of things they put in here that just didn't land super well when it comes to, like, the Marvel experience, because it's just things that we've already seen so many times before. I feel like what must have happened is when they were rewriting the script, they maybe started to scramble a bit and just decided to play it very safe and just fall back on the tried and true Marvel formula. And by golly, I swear with my hand on a stack of Bibles, as God is my witness, I'll hit you with the truth. I am so tired of that Marvel formula. I roll my eyes more at the Marvel formula than I did at Pythagorean theorem back in algebra class when I was in school. I am just exhausted from it. It just feels so worn out to me at this point. Like, it used to be like comfort food, you know, just like spoonfuls of ice cream in the form of Marvel movies and TV shows. But at this point, you know, now it's just like this gluttonous monster just constantly shoving the ice cream down your throat. And by the time you reach the bottom of the tub, you just feel like you get nothing out of it. At least that's how I feel. Luckily, the whole film doesn't just follow the standard story beats of Marvel films. It has incredible moments, and it's more of a slow burn of a movie where it's a lot of conversations, it's a lot of dialogue, but the dialogue is written so well that it's really the best parts. There's great action, of course, which is always fun to watch, but Like I said in the beginning, the emotional moments are the parts that I found to be the most interesting and really the highlights of the film. But they really start in like the second half of the film to just go down that more standard route. It transitions into a very standard, very safe, by the numbers, generic superhero film. You know, a very standard villain who wants to, destroy the world. They're the most powerful thing ever. The world's gotta go because they're not happy. They had a rough experience once as a kid. Now the fucking world's destroyed. Now it's gotta go. And it's up to our core team here to stop it. And it's very quippy, full of jokes. It's just so, like, done a million times before. The first film had an amazing villain with Killmonger, so it's hard not to remember that when the villain in this film is so weak. Namor isn't like a weak character in and of itself, but I just don't think they did a great job with the character. And I also felt like they really fell flat on showcasing the strength of the civilization he comes from. In the movie, Namor leads a civilization that's supposed to be as technologically advanced and as powerful as Wakanda. And they never really get that across. Like, the characters in that civilization, they ride around on animals like whales and shit, which is cool, but, they're not like cyber whales shooting laser beams with turrets on it or anything. They don't have any, like, aircrafts or anything. They're underwater, and they don't have any high tech. They're throwing spears, like normal spears, not even like cyber spears. They're vibranium spears, which is cool, I guess, but they're not. I never got the impression that they were that threatening. I felt like Wakanda could at any point crush them if they wanted to. They just never felt like a real threat. Like, the most high-tech thing we ever saw from Namor and his civilization is basically a big water balloon. They have these little water grenades where they throw them and they blow up into like this bomb of water. And that's really the most high-tech weaponry they showed. But they kept hammering it home that this civilization is unbeatable. They could wipe out Wakanda. They're so scary and strong. But they just did a terrible job of showing that. And I also just kind of felt like Namor was kind of lame. Like, that's a little harsh. I mean, he's not like, Weenie Hut Jr., like, the turbo nerd, not cool to watch or anything. But he doesn't have, like, a really interesting backstory, nor is he himself, like, an interesting villain either. They try and make him, like, sympathetic, but it doesn't land super well. And watching him fight and shit is pretty underwhelming, even though he's supposed to be extremely strong. And they do get that across, like, he is strong, but at no point did I ever think, damn, this guy's strong, he'll fuck you in the face, this is a real tough opponent here. And maybe I'm just not a huge fan of the character design. I thought the little wings on the ankles were kind of goofy, like the little Hermes shoes. Namor has these tiny little chicken wings on his feet that allow him to fly when he's in the surface area. And he can fly fast as shit, but I just don't think it looks very cool. Like, it just looks a little silly. Like, it just looks like these tiny little wings that you'd see on a small flightless bird. Like, I think the character could have been cool. They could have done something great with the character, and I think the actor did a great job with the character, but it just didn't really land. I just felt like it was more of a miss than anything. Now, maybe they'll build the character up in the future, perhaps. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but as it is in this film, I just felt really underwhelmed by the villain. And, it's like, I want to make it clear, I don't think this movie was bad by any means. I did enjoy it overall, but I think it was just way too long as well. This is a 2 hour and 41 minute movie. That's just way too fucking long. They could have absolutely cut out quite a bit of that. I like slow burn, long films, but this movie had no reason to be that long. There's like entire side quests in here that don't even matter. Without getting into spoilers, they follow around some familiar faces in America, and they're doing some things and talking about what's happening in Wakanda. But everything they're doing just feels so meaningless and doesn't have like a real impact on the story or anything really. So it just feels like, why are we spending any time with them, let alone like 20 to 30 minutes? We could have absolutely just maybe cut that out of the film, and I think that would have helped just bring the runtime down a little bit, because it is just kind of a lot, with some moments like that not really contributing much. But overall, like, I did like the film. I also really liked the soundtrack, which I already expected I would. The soundtrack in the first one also fucking slapped, and I knew this one would be just as good, and it is. So overall, I did enjoy it. It just has some things that I didn't like as much. So plugging Black Panther Wakanda Forever into the Moist meter, I'm going to give it a nice clean 70%. I think they've done a lot of good things with this film. There was a lot of things that did work, but there were a lot of things that didn't as well. But yeah, overall, it was good. That's about it. See ya.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at the new Venom movie, Let There Be Carnage. With the first Venom movie, I was applauded for my bravery, cheered on in the comment section for finally saying what people were afraid to say when the movie came out, that it kind of fucking sucked ass. I didn't like the first Venom movie that much. I didn't think it was great. Felt like I was missing so many things, and the final product was just like a choppy mess where it didn't really have a satisfying story and a way of getting there. My biggest complaint was like Venom and his relationship with Eddie Brock. It just feels like it just came out of nowhere. In one scene, they hate each other, Venom's mad, and then the next scene he's like, you know what, I want to fucking save humanity. It's like, well, how did we get there? But setting aside my criticisms of the first movie, I think the second movie is better. I think it's a goofy, fun movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously at all. But it's also pretty redundant when compared to the first movie because it kind of does the same thing. At the end of the first Venom movie, it's like, we're going to save the world, we're going to eat bad guys, we're going to be a hero that's not afraid to rip some fucking heads off. And in this movie, they come in and they're like, we're not ripping heads off, you're in timeout, because Eddie Brock doesn't want bad guys to get their heads eaten by Venom. So pretty much the entire movie is just them bantering with each other. And granted, it is enjoyable, because I think the writing's good and Tom Hardy's very good. So them joking around and getting mad at each other and having these arguments that you would expect a couple to have is fun. But when that's the entire first hour of the movie, like the bulk of what's going on is just them not seeing eye to eye on how bad guys should be eaten and how they should be a hero and how Eddie Brock just wants to be left alone, it's just kind of tiresome because we've already kind of seen that with the first movie. I do love the actual fight with Carnage. I think at the end of the movie when they fight, it all works really well. It's a very satisfying fight, but everything leading up to there, I feel like they didn't know how to get it to that point. So they just threw in what worked the first time for most people, which was the back and forth with Eddie Brock and Venom. And I will say again, I just don't think Venom movies work at a PG-13 rating. Like for Carnage, for example, when Carnage is going crazy, he's fucking killing everyone, and Cletus Cassidy, when they're killing everyone, it's really cheapened by the fact that they do it all like off camera, off screen. So you don't really see that. You're not really like afraid of them or really impressed with their power. It's like, oh, this guy, he kicked somebody, and now we don't see that person again. It's like, it's kind of lame. That's not exactly scary. I said this in the first movie. I thought it was supposed to be R initially because the first movie is so chopped up that it feels like they cut out everything that made it R. And I also feel that way about this movie. It feels at times that it's edited in a way to hide scenes that were R-rated that they took away at the last second. I don't think that's the case because the first movie was PG-13. I imagine they planned for this one to be the same rating, but it still does feel that way. It's just there's something about the movie. Like, it just jumps around, and it just gets real silly. And not like it's self-aware silliness, just like, this is kind of dumb. To give you an example, this is going a bit into spoiler territory, so spoiler warning for this. At the end of the movie with the fight with Carnage, Cassidy has his girlfriend there, and you don't care about his girlfriend. They don't really do anything to flesh out this relationship or make you, as a viewer, care. It's pretty underwhelming. It's kind of dumb. But it's there because they thought it needed to be there to have like a climactic final showdown, so it is what it is. And his girlfriend is very clearly a psychopath just like Cassidy. She's killing people, she encourages him to kill people, she's impressed when people are dying, cars are blowing up, cops are being murdered, she loves it. And then at the very end of the movie, it inexplicably, or maybe I missed it, Carnage is about to hurt Eddie Brock's most important person. And she's like, don't do this, Cassidy, now you've gone too far, you've got to stop. So then Carnage starts strangling her. He's like, we're not stopping, and I'm going to shut you up. And then Cassidy's like, no, that's my girlfriend. And then there's like this, back and forth with Carnage and Cassidy, like, you can't hurt her, it's my girlfriend. But she told us to stop, and she can scream real loud, that's bad for us. And it's like, well, what the fuck is going on? Why was she even, like, upset with Carnage and Cassidy in the first place? She was all on board for killing complete strangers. And now, when it's someone who's a little less of a stranger, someone she actively kidnaps, now it's a problem. It's like, well, what the fuck is going on? So, it's just really, again, all over the place sometimes, and it just feels like it's missing crucial shots and scenes. Okay, now back from spoilers. The rest will be spoiler free. That was really the main one I wanted to talk about. Like I said, I didn't have like a bad time watching the movie. I enjoyed it because I thought the goddamn, I got fucking eyelash in my eye. But yeah, like I said, I did have fun watching it because the writing was strong with its banter. Since that was the main bulk of the movie, was just them bantering, and they at least did a good job with that. They even sent fucking Venom to a rave, so it's very clear that they're indulging in the silliness of the movie. But overall, I don't think it's like a great movie. Cletus Cassidy, I think, is played well by Woody Harrelson, but it's not a very good character. They don't do a great job with him. They just established he had a girlfriend that he, this girl that he really liked when he was young, and now he wants to get back together with her, and he's a serial killer. And they try and do that thing with serial killers where they say, like, the wackiest shit that's, like, super deep, but with Cassidy here, they just don't know how to write that. It's like, you see it like in like anime where the villain has like these crazy monologues that are all like really profound and like wild. Well, they try and do that with Cassidy, but it just doesn't work. So like when he's on death row, he's giving like his last speech, and it's just super goofy. It's not like, oh, that was scary, ominous, and yet profound. It was like, he'll give a speech and it's like, hey, Eddie, when you flush a toilet and the water goes down the pipes, that water's not coming back. That's like me on death row. I'm water in a toilet, Eddie. It's like, it wasn't a very cool villain monologue, and it really wasn't it's scary. It was just kind of goofy. So that was pretty disappointing. And again, the girlfriend isn't really a strong character either. They don't do much to flesh her out. They just make her equally a psychopath to Cletus Cassidy. So that's really all you get there from that relationship. So you as a viewer aren't really going to care very much. But like I said, the final fight with Venom vs. Carnage was satisfying. I did enjoy it. I just wish leading up to there was more about the movie than just banter. There are some scenes of Carnage blowing up police cars, blowing up helicopters and shit, and it's good. Like it's still fun to watch. I think Carnage is a really cool character. But it's disappointing to have a character like Carnage, who's all about fucking murder, blood in the streets and gore and shit, like going crazy, to be a PG-13 movie where it just feels like he's a super watered-down version of Carnage. So he's not as intimidating as you would expect him to be. But that's more nitpicky. I don't think this movie was ever going to be R-rated, though I think it should have. It's not bad. I want to make that clear. I definitely think this is better than the first movie, so I did enjoy it. I didn't have a bad time. Let's plug it into the Moist Meter. I'm giving Venom Let There Be Carnage a 60%. Hopefully, if they continue the Venom franchise, they can finally stop making the majority of the movie just Eddie Brock and Venom bantering. It is enjoyable, but I think doing it 3 times in a row as like the main bulk of the movie is going to be a bit much. So hopefully now we can just establish he is the lethal protector. They're on the same page now, and going forward, we can start from that point instead of go backwards. So anyway, that's about it. See ya.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at the newest Marvel movie, Eternals. This one had a lot of bad press around it, people saying this is the worst one ever made before it came out. It had a lower Rotten Tomato scores than usual. Fucking DEFCON alerts were sounding, people going into full meltdown mode, shitting on it before it came out, or defending it before it came out without any of them ever seeing it. So it was pandemonium on Twitter. I went into this expecting it to not be great because I don't know anything about the Eternals or any of that shit. I thought the trailer was okay, just some more generic Marvel stuff. Now, after having sat through the movie, I can tell you that I was 100% right. It was just some more generic Marvel stuff. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was great either. It's a movie where I watched it, and I'll probably never think about it again. I like the concept of the movie. I'm a sucker for like space shit and celestials and gods and all of that, and that plays a huge role in this movie without giving anything away. So I love the ideas of the movie, but the execution is kinda doggy ass at points. I don't think it's like ever like horrible, like laughably bad or anything, but like there's some really rough CGI moments that a lot of people were also picking out before it came out that is present in the final film during some of the fights. It gets real noodly, where some of the characters like stretching all over the place out of nowhere, fucking spaghettifying. So like, yeah, there's definitely some silly moments like that, which is weird for a Marvel movie, which is known for their big CGI fights and all that. You'd think it'd be super clean, but it definitely isn't at points here. That's not to say that the movie looks bad, because like I said, I love the space shit, and when they're doing all the space shit and all of these space powers, celestials and gods, and showcasing all that, it looks magnificent. It looks fucking great. I love the visuals there, but their fights can get kind of rough. And there's one bad guy in particular who's a real goofy villain, probably one of the worst villains in the MCU. Doesn't even have a name, but he's like the main person that they keep clashing against, and he's completely nameless, and he's not very cool either. He's not as bad as Black Widow's villain, whose superpower was he's stinky, so when you smell him, you can't hurt him. Spoiler alert, but he's not as bad as that guy, but he's still pretty silly. Anyway, I'm already getting like way off course. Like I said, I like the ideas of the movie. The main Eternals, they're living on Earth for 7,000 years now after their mission, and you know, they're viewed as gods. They're not really hiding anything, so throughout history, the gods are basically structured around the actual Eternals, and that's a cool thing to explore, so you get to see them going through history, doing some shit and influencing some things. But just overall, it wasn't super engaging. I wouldn't say it's boring by any means, because I think the characters had good chemistry, so even when they're just like bantering, which is classic Marvel formula, it's still enjoyable to listen to them. I think they all work together well. But it just wasn't like I wasn't like really invested. And I think that's mainly because like the things they're fighting are just mutant dogs. The deviants are just like these dog creatures that they just use golden glowing energy against. So they just slash at the dog legs, and then that's about it for like action and all that. And when there's not action, it's them discussing the deviants and like, humans, do we like them? We like them, but are they worth liking? I don't know. It's like you can only hear that conversation so many times. But on a more positive note, I really like what the Eternals sets up. It introduces some really cool characters into the mix that I'm pretty excited to see explored throughout the rest of the MCU here. I like where it's going. I just feel like this movie wasn't a super fun ride to get there. I really don't have much else to say about this movie. Like, it's not even that I'm trying to avoid spoilers, it's just a very underwhelming MCU entry. I don't think it's a horrible movie by any means. I think it's fine on its own feet, but it's just not a movie where you're going to be excited. And you'd probably forget the characters' names by the end of it if they weren't named after gods. I just really don't think it's a very memorable movie, but I do like the direction it pushed the MCU by the end. So I'm excited to see where it goes, but overall, I just don't think it was that great. But again, I don't think it's horrible either. Plugging Eternals into the moist meter, I'm just going to give it like a 60%, I feel. Like I said, there's nothing about it that's bad, but it is just the same Marvel formula you're used to, that it doesn't try to do anything super different. And by doing that, by playing it so incredibly safe, it becomes this forgettable movie. So that's just kind of where I'm at with it, and that's about it. So yeah.
Initiating moisture.
There's a lot of controversy surrounding Captain Marvel. I don't give a shit about any of it. We're not going to talk about it or touch on it. We're just going to look at the movie and see if it was a good fucking movie or not. So, the movie's main character is Captain Marvel, as you would expect from the title of the film, Captain Marvel. She's not a very good character, unfortunately. I don't think she's bad, and I even think Brie Larson does a great job with the character, but it seems like she doesn't really have a personality of her own. There's nothing memorable about her as a character. Her powers are pretty fucking cool, and I think they did a great job of showing how strong the character is physically from a powers perspective, at least at the end of the movie. Up until then, it was very lackluster with its action and showing Captain Marvel doing shit, And the action in this movie is my biggest complaint. It was some of the worst action in any Marvel movie I've seen, rivaling even Ant-Man and the Wasp in terms of its lazy, uninteresting action. I'd rather watch two fucking action figures colliding than half the shit on the screen, because at least it wouldn't be as nauseating watching action figures collide. In this movie, I was goddamn sick during some of the fight scenes. The shaky cam was unbearable. It seemed like every fucking camera operator was undergoing a seizure while filming every action scene. It was bad. I absolutely despised the action scenes, and they weren't even good from a choreography perspective. They weren't even flashy. They were just bad and an eyesore, honestly. And that's a shame when it's a superhero movie where the action is always what it leads up to. You have a fucking superhero that's about to super fist some assholes with their power, and in here you didn't look forward to that. This movie's at its best when it's not giving you action, and it's giving you a little buddy cop movie between Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury, and Captain Marvel, Brie Larson. I think the chemistry between those two is great, even though it's really just Sam carrying the conversations. But even still, it's fun to watch them banter back and forth. There's a cool cat that comes into play that I thought was a good character. I thought the cat was just going to be a gimmicky bullshit thing, but it turned out it was a character that I liked and I thought was used well. From a story perspective, it's as cliche as it gets. This is the most cliche superhero movie I think I've ever seen in my life. This is like some mid-90s Saturday morning cartoon level of cheese. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but everything this movie does has been done before and done much better by other superhero movies. I think Wonder Woman is a stronger character than Captain Marvel. I think they're very similar in terms of how they were portrayed in their movies, but Wonder Woman was significantly more interesting, significantly better of a character than Captain Marvel. I also don't like the gimmick of the main character suffering from amnesia, not knowing her past, so then you slowly piece it together as to how they got there. I don't like that. Just start with all the knowledge out there, and then give us some fun. I don't like where the character's drastically weakened, and we have to go a whole movie getting back to where they were at the very start, or figuring out how they got there. I don't like that shit. That's a pet peeve. I don't think they do amnesia poorly in here. It's not well done, but I don't think it's bad. It's just very generic. They very slowly piece the puzzle pieces together, and oh, what do you know? The most expected outcome is what you're left with. The story is incredibly predictable. The villain's incredibly predictable. Honestly, there's nothing in this movie from like a narrative perspective that's going to capture anyone's interest. Now, this is not to say that it's bad, because it's not. It's just so average, expected, predictable, safe. It's forgettable. It's unfortunately very, very forgettable, where you don't regret seeing it, because there are some good moments in this movie. I definitely think there are some good moments, for sure. None of them involving fights, because all of those suck ass. But towards the end of the movie, there's some cool shit that goes on, and I think some of the characters are strong, especially Samuel L. Jackson's character, and also there's a Skrull character in here that I think is very well fleshed out and developed. I just think this whole movie was super, super formulaic. I know Marvel has a formula that we've all come to expect, but they always put a nice little spin on it, whether it's the visuals, whether it's the humor, whether it's a twist in the story, something. This has none of that. There is none of that here. This is just as if a fucking Google AI experiment was tasked to make the most by-the-numbers superhero movie it could. This would be the result. And that's unfortunate to say, because I think Captain Marvel is a really cool character conceptually, and I do like the character. I just don't think the character really shines in this movie at all. Maybe in Avengers Endgame she will, but here it's just in a super forgettable movie that I don't think anyone's going to remember going into Endgame. They'll have to go back, rewatch this, and figure out who the fuck Captain Marvel is and how she got there. I mean, that's about all I have to say about that. I mean, even the sound. I was expecting like perhaps a good score even. I'd settle for like a better soundtrack than other Marvel movies, but you didn't get that. Everything here is predictably Marvel, but below Marvel standards, honestly. It doesn't quite reach the good Marvel movies. It's like right smack dab in the middle Marvel movies. This is like early Marvel movies. This would be like in the fucking early phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This would be smack dab in there. And that's unfortunate considering this was supposed to be a heavy hitter and setting up this crazy powerful character. So it's a bit of a letdown that the movie to showcase all that was so forgettable. Let's plug this shit into the moist meter. I'm giving Captain Marvel a 65%. Again, to reiterate, it's not a bad movie. It is extremely predictable with some good moments, but the action is never one of those good moments. I can't stress that enough. I really despised when anything was fucking happening on screen that could be even misconstrued as action. It was so poorly done. I don't know what kind of fucking filming techniques they learned in school, but that school needs to just be abolished. Get it out of here. That school is a goddamn crime against eyes if they're teaching their students to film movie action scenes like this one here. It's bad. I really didn't like the action. That's it. See ya.
This episode of the Moist Meter is brought to you by The Beard Club. More on them at the end.
Initiating moisture.
The new Venom movie is PG-13. Let me make that clear because it seems everyone in the fucking world expected this movie to be R and were under the impression that this was the same R-rated movie Tom Hardy signed up for initially. It is not. This movie is a highly edited Venom movie that is a PG-13 rating and a very casual PG-13 at that. This movie is also a big pile of dog shit. It is really bad. And my expectations for this were super low, and brought even lower when 2 days ago Tom Hardy was interviewed and asked his favorite scene, and he said his favorite scenes are the 40 minutes that didn't even make it into the final cut. So that's really nice to hear that the lead actor's favorite scenes aren't even in the movie. So it doesn't seem like he even stands behind the project. So then my expectations were even lower after hearing that. And then I saw the movie, and I was still disappointed. I don't know how you could fuck up this movie as badly as they did. There was so much potential in this one. I really like the cast. I think everyone fit well in the universe, and I really like Venom. I thought Venom was super fucking nice to look at, and he was a cool character, and I enjoyed his little quips every now and then, but the movie as a whole is just an absolute fucking mess. Also, I don't know what kind of accent Tom Hardy was going for with his performance, because he just sounds like a kid half the time. In one of the scenes, he says that he has a problem, but instead of saying he has a problem, he says, I have a problem. And that's, that's adorable and shit, and you go, oh, that's so cute, but then you realize, that's a fucking man right there. That's Tom Hardy. That's a fucking man's man. Why is he sounding like some Girl Scout that's 6 years old trying to sell cookies? It's a dumb accent, but I thought he did a good job with the character of Eddie Brock. But, I mean, it's just a bad fucking movie. This movie is an absolute mess in terms of plot. Nothing really seems to flow. It feels like they cut 40 minutes out of this movie. It honestly feels like half the scenes just end abruptly. A lot of times there'll be a mid-fight, cut away from the action, and then we're on to the next scene where the fight's already over. I don't mean to make it sound like there's a lot of fighting or action in the first place, because there's not. The entire first half of this movie is boring and uninteresting and doesn't even set the stage in a great way. But this whole movie just feels like it's missing everything that could have made it good. It's like a book report that was written by a student that only read the cliff notes and then went back and edited and took shit out because they went over the word count, so they were going to get points deducted for going over. The point I'm making is, it seems like everything they took out was the important shit. Let me give you an example. Like, the plot just isn't cohesive at all, and I'm going to give you an example, and it's a little bit of a spoiler, but not too big of a spoiler. Venom is, he's on top of a building with Eddie, and he says, this planet's kind of cool, but it's going to end, and that's alright. Sorry, your planet's going to end. In the next scene, Eddie betrays Venom, gets Venom taken out of him. After that, Eddie gets captured. And then, after Eddie gets captured, Venom finds him in the disguise of a female Venom and makes out with Eddie to give himself to him. And then, Venom says, Eddie, you've changed my mind, I'm saving this planet. How the fuck did Eddie change Venom's mind? 15 minutes ago, Venom was totally fine with letting the planet die, and then nothing happened except Eddie betraying him. It doesn't make sense. It seems like it missed everything. There's no character building. The entire time Eddie and Venom are together, they're not really doing anything. They have a couple of quips and shit, and that's about it, and then they kill a couple of people, but there's nothing that would have made an impact on Venom because it was taken out of the movie. So out of nowhere, Venom just decides he wants to save the planet, he's going to fight for the humans, and he wants to be a superhero. Well, how the fuck did he come to that conclusion? We'll never know, because it's not in the movie. I can understand how Tom Hardy's favorite shit is not in this movie, because there's fucking nothing in this movie. It's just left with these soulless, uninteresting plot points, and some kind of cool action occasionally. Like, there's a lot of potential here. Venom could have been a great player in the superhero universe, but this movie is a complete failure in that regard. And the final fight in this movie is nauseating and confusing. It just looks like two handfuls of cum that are being shaken around in a cup. You can't make heads or tails of who's doing what or what the fuck is happening on screen. It's a mess. It's a gooey, ooey mess at the end of this movie. And then it just kind of ends. That's the entire, it just ends abruptly. Just like every other fucking scene in this entire fucking movie. it's such a disappointment because I really do think there was a lot of potential, and I would love to see the original cut of this movie because I have a hunch that it's really good. I really feel like the original vision here in the original cut would have been spectacular, but what we're left with is a choppily edited and really watered down piece of shit that makes no sense. The only positives I can give this movie are I thought Venom was pretty cool, and like the way they used his powers in some situations was kind of cool, but it's just not good. It's really not good. It's not the worst superhero movie ever made, but it's a really bad one. It's a fucking stinker. Let's plug this shit into the moist meter. I'm giving Venom a 25%. It's such a fucking shame because there's so much potential there. And I just can't help but wonder what the fuck they're going to do with all the original footage that they still have, that Tom Hardy holds near and dear to his boner, and that fans really want to see. I'm very curious what they're going to do with that. But for now, this is just not a good movie. Not at all.
You know, one thing that could have made Venom a good movie is if Venom had have used the Beard Club to grow himself up a fierce beard. Hi, Head Beard Inspector Jackson here with news about how you can grow or maintain your own sexy beard forest the easy way. Research conducted at the Bureau of Facial Hair within Moist Meter HQ has concluded one simple fact. The Beard Club is the best and most affordable way to maintain and love your facial hair. And as we all know, a happy beard equals a happy life. The Beard Club ships you a package full of beard-maintaining goodies each month that'll guarantee to make you the talk of the town. These delectable little goodies are $25 an ounce everywhere else, but because the Beard Club is so kind and dedicated to allowing everyone the gift of a beard, it's only $4 an ounce with them. On the extremely rare chance that your beard doesn't like the product, the Beard Club offers a 100% money-back guarantee to ensure everyone maintains a healthy relationship with both their beard and their wallet. You know, I shouldn't tell you this, but the Beard Club slipped me a note in the dim parking garage of Moist Meter HQ and told me to tell you to check out their website and socials. As thanks for their note, I ran up to my office and I conducted an illegal moisture rating and found that the Beard Club scored a 100% on the Moist Meter. I discovered the truth, and now if I'm ever assassinated, you know why. This episode of Moist Meter was brought to you by NordVPN. More on that at the end.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Quantum Moist Meter. Today we're going to quantumly analyze the quantum moisture found within the new Ant-Man movie. Why am I saying quantum so much? Well, it's because this movie says the word quantum so many fucking times. It reminds me of that episode of SpongeBob and Rock Bottom where it's can't understand your accent, you know? But in this movie, instead of doing it says the word quantum. It is everywhere in this movie, and it will make you forget that quantum is a real word by the end of it. This is absolutely the weakest MCU movie in my opinion, but that being said, it's not a bad movie. There's a lot about this movie that's just very stinky, but overall it's an alright movie. So let's just go ahead and start with the story, because that's the worst part. The story is just so fucking lazy and haphazardly tossed together. It's almost insulting in its blatant laziness. It's almost like they're spitting on your intelligence. I'm not going to try and spoil anything too major. If I do spoil something, it's going to be very minor, so don't jerk yourself off too feverishly in the comments about how I spoiled that Scott Lang's hair is a little longer in this movie than in the last one. The story is Scott Lang's under house arrest for events of previous movies, but he needs to hop back in the saddle because Hank and Hope need him. So he's got to rock and roll, go big, go small, blast balls because he's got another huge mission. And that mission is they're going to get the mom back. I hope that's not a spoiler because that's revealed within the first couple of minutes of the movie. That's the whole purpose. So they want to get her out of the quantum realm. How do they explain how she survived 30 years in the quantum realm with no food and no water and really no way of being able to survive? Well, their explanation was very thought-provoking, scientific, and thorough. The explanation was, well, things move differently down there. Thank you. Now it all makes sense. That about covers it. And that's pretty much the whole tone of the rest of the movie's story. They just throw this shit at you and expect you to just take it at face value and not think much on it. And I guess that's not such a bad thing. It's a superhero movie. But this one is so much worse in terms of its story because this whole movie's plot could have been avoided within the first 30 minutes of the movie. In 30 minutes, the movie could have been done, kaput, everyone happy. The main villain of this movie is a character named Ghost. She can phase through shit. And she wants the technology that Hank and Hope are using to get their mom back because she needs it. And had Hank, Hope, and Scott communicated with Ghost what they wanted to do, how they were going to do it, Ghost would have been on their side. And they could have all worked together and been this super team and got everything solved. And everyone would have been fine, all parties happy. There was no reason that Ghost should have even been a villain had they just talked to her or had she talked to them and communicated. The hero's goals and the villain's goals were exactly the fucking same except for one small detail in the villain's goals that really you could have talked her out of or convinced her to just hold off on a little bit. It'd be as if you were working on a take-home quiz in school with your friend and you both got the same answer, but your friend didn't show all the work you showed. It'd be like you then going out of your way to slap your friend and never talk to him again because of that, and you just mortal enemies. It's so fucking dumb. It could have been avoided. It should have. It's just such a shit plot. And aside from that, there's so many other holes in this plot. It's embarrassing. It really is. But you would think with them not putting too much of a focus on the plot, they'd make up for it with cool scenes and action and a lot of cool shit happening on screen, but they don't. There's almost no action in this movie until the very end, and even that's pretty underwhelming. You get a couple scenes of action sprinkled here and there, little tinkles of bits of action here. But the action you do get here isn't very interesting. Every fight just kind of boils down to punch, shrink, kick, shrink, punch, punch, ouch, I'm hurt. That's the end of the fight. It's very not impressive. It's like a fucking N64 game with limited animation, so they did the best they could with what they had. It's basically fucking Rock'em Sock'em Robots with the occasional shrinking. They just never really use the shit that makes them superheroes in the first place. They use it occasionally, but not very much and not in interesting ways at all. This movie is carried heavily by great comedy writing and great character dialogue. And that's good that it's so good in that department because that's the majority of this movie. This movie is mainly just characters tossing pseudoscience-y terms at one another as if every character is just reading some type of sci-fi Tumblr blog post with science terms to sound smart at a bar to impress women. Tip your fedora at the end, sirs, for m'ladies. But when it's not desperately trying to make sense of a plot and it's just tossing good jokes at you and good character dialogue, it's an alright movie, it's fine. But it's just not a good superhero movie because it doesn't have anything that makes it a superhero movie. It has okay visuals when they go to the quantum realm, that's kind of cool, but that lasts all of 5 minutes, and that's it. It's just not a good MCU movie. It's an alright movie because it's carried so heavily by good comedy writing, but past that, there's just nothing of value here, except good acting, but it's a Marvel movie, you're going to get good acting. Let's go ahead and plug this shit into the moist meter. I'm giving Ant-Man and the Wasp a 55%. It's an average movie, it's okay. There were some jokes that I had a little giggle at and smiled at. Then there was times where I was sinking into my seat because what I was looking at was just embarrassing, or what I was hearing was just nonsensically embarrassing to listen to. It seems like this movie was such an afterthought in the MCU. Like they'd already written all of the movies and they'd already written Infinity War, but then one brave intern accidentally spoke a little too loudly in a hushed whisper, "Yeah, but what about Ant-Man?" And everyone threw their hands up in the air, "Fuck! We have Ant-Man, don't we? We gotta do something with him. Alright, let's just go ahead and fucking ham-fist him into the Infinity War plot," so we kind of explain that, and we'll just dedicate a movie to him with like a $50 budget, I guess. We have good writers here, right? Let's write some good shit, and then we'll give you a little bit for action, but let's not use too much of that. Let's pull a plot out of our ass. Let's do it, boys. We gotta make it happen, quick. This seems like this movie had no real purpose to exist. This movie seems very trivial. There's almost nothing that happens in this movie that feels like it has any impact on the MCU, except for the post-credit scene. The post-credit scene was very well done, and I really liked the post-credit scene, but overall this movie just seems pointless and useless, trivial. It seems like just, it's so unrelated to everything and just not anything important. And it really feels like no one really cared about it. It's a shame because the first Ant-Man was really good, and this one's, it's pretty stinky in a lot of ways, but like I said, it's okay. It's alright.
Hey folks, Moist Meter security tactician Jackson here with exciting news for all Moist Meter fans. If you know anything about the internet, it's that it's an extremely dangerous place. Luckily for you, NordVPN has taken the call to action and pledged to keep you safe. With NordVPN, you can encrypt your online activity and protect your private data from those pesky hackers and goddamn filthy advertisers. You can rest easy knowing NordVPN is reputable. After all, they were selected as the best VPN in Best VPN Awards for 2018 by one of the most trusted experts, VPN Mentor. It's also risk-free. If you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, but we here at the Moist Meter Security Bureau are pretty confident you'll like feeling as secure as NordVPN allows you to feel. With their military-grade encryption, iOS and Android implementation, and 4,000 plus servers in 62 countries, it's a no-brainer. If you need more convincing, how's this sound? You can get 77% off the NordVPN subscription by using our URL, Penguinz0, found in the description below, and secure your internet today with NordVPN. $2.75 a month, that's a small price for being hidden on the internet. NordVPN, check them out below.
You know how everyone's been saying that Marvel's kind of fallen off? The quality of its shows and even its movies has just been dwindling to a point where it's not really exciting to see them anymore and they're kind of stinky. Whoo-wee! Wait until you see the Marvels. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I mean this with no exaggeration. The Marvels is the MCU's messiest movie to date, and it's not even close. I actually can't even believe the movie released in its current state. It almost feels like this is internal sabotage from someone on the inside trying to sink the MCU and make it go even lower, because it's like nobody even bothered to watch what they were putting out there. I really thought Ant-Man Quantumania would probably be the worst modern Marvel movie we'd ever get. How wrong I was. It's like they took every single criticism that's ever been thrown against the MCU and said, "Oh, you thought that was bad, watch this," and then did all of it 10 times worse. It feels as though they shot 4 different films, and then took some elements from each one, haphazardly threw them all together into this witch's cauldron here, bubbling over into this fucking potion that induces a headache in all of the spectators. This movie is fundamentally like 4 action sequences that are loosely strung together with the worst narrative the MCU's ever had, because it doesn't even try to develop the characters or their relationships. I'm gonna go ahead and get my only compliment about this movie out of the way right now. I've never seen the Ms. Marvel show, so this movie was my introduction to Ms. Marvel, and she is great. Both the actress playing Ms. Marvel and even the character I think has so much potential in the universe. She is the only good thing about this movie. She fucking kills it. Ms. Marvel is the only thing this movie does well, but it's not nearly enough to save it or even make this worth watching. It doesn't redeem the 150 minutes that get flushed down the shitter. So let's go ahead and dive in. The biggest mistake this movie makes is with its villain. The most forgettable villain in MCU history, the most underdeveloped villain in MCU history. I don't know how we're in 2023 with like fucking 15 years worth of MCU movies, and a big criticism was underdeveloped villains in some of the movies, and somehow this deep into the game, phase fucking 5 here, they deliver the worst villain they've ever had. I can't even remember her name. I have to keep looking it up and then I still forget it. That's how forgettable she is. I think her name is Danber. I looked it up again. Darbin. Her name is Darbin. Fundamentally, she is like Ronin if Ronin was written in 5 minutes. Like, all she does is she creates some portals that suck things up occasionally. And that's it. Spoilers, I'll tell you her motivation, and it's only explained in a couple of lines of dialogue. Instead of showing you, they just tell you. It really does feel like a lot of this was AI generated at the last possible second. I'm just gonna fucking say it. Basically, Captain Marvel made a decision that had a huge effect on the Kree and caused a lot of problems for them. Darbin, being one of the Kree, will do anything to try and save them. She hates Captain Marvel and thus wants to take things from her in order to help save the Kree, basically. And since this is only explained in a few lines of dialogue that feel almost like throwaway lines, there's no actual emotional investment here. Since they don't bother to flesh out Darbin at all, she becomes kind of like this villain caricature, this cartoonishly evil presence that's evil for the sake of being nasty. And even when Darbin and Captain Marvel are on screen together, there's still no emotional weight to anything that happens because they're speedrunning through shit and barely even attempting to make something cohesive. But she's not really a big threat, because they make it clear early on that the only reason she's not defeated easily by Captain Marvel is because the big gimmick of the movie keeps happening where they switch places when they use their powers. So Miss Marvel even says, like, I know you could absolutely just fucking clobber her if we would stop switching places, and I'm sorry about that. And she's right, because the main villain isn't very strong. And in fact, every time they meet her, they pretty much do defeat her until she just miraculously pulls out like a big force blast that opens up that portal at the last possible second. But even aside from just the super weak villain, this movie is tonally all over the place. The vast majority of the film doesn't take itself seriously. It's mainly like a Thor Love and Thunder fucking flat comedy where almost none of the jokes are landing. The worst offender is actually Nick Fury. Nick Fury has a prominent role here, but he's just literally a clown. I don't think he has a single line of dialogue in this movie that isn't a joke or leading into a punchline. Even when the stakes are super high, like, oh, we might, you know, lose the world here if Darbin's plan goes correctly. And even when he's about to fucking die, he's making jokes the entire time. What happened to this character? It's not even consistent with the Nick Fury that we know, or the one that was in Secret Invasion, which I didn't finish because I didn't really like it that much. But this is not the same character. They like replaced him with a goofball. Like I don't understand what even happened here. Almost every single scene outside of action is all over the place. It wants to be like this wacky, quirky, zany comedy, and then sometimes it wants to be like a drama, and then sometimes it wants to be more action-focused. It's at its best when it's doing action. I think some of the action scenes are pretty decent, though there are moments here where you can really feel the tears from the CGI artists that have to work on this. They are just overworked. The VFX department at Marvel, like, I can feel their pain through some of these scenes, because a lot of them feel as though they didn't have time to actually finish it. I don't hold it against them, it's just the Marvel pipeline where they're constantly just fucking pumping shit out as quickly as possible without a care in the world. But there are some action sequences that look alarmingly rough in the CGI department. But for the most part, the action is pretty okay. Like, it's pretty fun, especially, like, the final fight is interesting, I guess. But it doesn't really matter that much, because there's not a real movie around it. You're basically just watching, like, a montage of some decent action moments, and that's it. So, anyway, back to what I was saying. In between these action sequences, when it's trying to do a bunch of different things, it fails on all fronts. Let me give you an example. So there's a planet they visit, and it's a planet that means a lot to Captain Marvel. And the inhabitants of that world only communicate through song. If you just speak, they can't understand you. It basically has to be a musical. And I think it is the most insufferable sequence, or series of scenes the MCU's ever had. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, if this was a Rick and Morty sketch, fine. Like, this feels like it'd fit right at home in some kind of Saturday morning cartoon special as like a joke. But this comes in the middle of the film where things are getting desperate, where the villain's succeeding, and like, this is a planet Captain Marvel really cares about, and it's about to get fucked in the ass. And it's like, okay, why are we having like a musical here about this and not taking anything seriously? And even when they fail to protect it, 10 seconds later, Captain Marvel's joking! Like, this is a place she called home 5 minutes ago. She fucking fails to protect it from Darbin, and she immediately just starts joking about it. And then the next scene, pretty much, they go into this whole cat subplot. This whole side quest with cats, and Nick Fury, and cats. Like, it's all over the place. You can't take it seriously if the movie itself doesn't take it seriously and isn't actually held together by anything at all. There's no real substance here. The only time this movie even comes close to making an emotional beat work is between Captain Marvel and Monica Rambeau. They have a relationship that is loosely explored and only one time successfully gets across the weight of it. And that's through this sequence where they're seeing each other's memories. They all kind of tap into this thing that's showing memories, and they do a good job of setting up Captain Marvel and Monica there. But outside of that, anytime they try and explore that, they don't give it any real chance. Like, it just falls flat again. They have one good emotional scene with that, and then completely forgot how to do it appropriately because they were too busy focusing on lame humor. And going into the film, I imagine a lot of you think that the switching of places is going to be integral to the plot. It's really not. Like, it's used occasionally, but it doesn't even follow its own rules for the switching sometimes. Like, they forget to switch. It's supposed to be when they, like, use their powers at the same time they switch, but there's multiple scenes where they both, or all three of them really, will use their powers at pretty much the same time and not switch. It's like they forgot that that gimmick was even present sometimes. And it doesn't really play a role in the narrative outside of explaining why Darbin just can't be easily defeated by by Captain Marvel. So while I think the concept could have been fun to explore, like, these three characters need to work together in order to overcome an overwhelmingly powerful enemy and somehow use this to their advantage, the ability to switch places. Somehow they take that and just make it like, we'll utilize it sometimes, but it doesn't really matter. And even at the end of the movie, they just kind of throw it away. They just wipe their ass with it. They just say like, oh, we're not entangled anymore. It's like, oh, okay. Well, okay then. I guess so. It's like, come on. Like, I don't know what went wrong here. In its current state, the movie only works if you want to go and just watch some mindless action and then not listen to any of the dialogue or the story. Like, that's probably the only way you can get any amount of enjoyment out of it. Because like I said, some of the action is pretty good, but like, that doesn't make a movie. You still need more than that. And it's not like the action is anything new to the MCU. It's all still very generic for the most part. There's nothing new here, aside from new lows that it reached with how little it actually cared. And now I have no idea what they're even going to do with these characters going forward, because this movie did nothing to progress any of them except Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel, like I said, is the only component of this film that works at all. She is the only good part of this movie. Monica, I think, could have been great here. I think WandaVision was building up to Monica being a very strong and interesting character, but this movie just ruined it. They didn't let her do anything until the very end. I won't spoil that, but at the very end she becomes the most important character pretty much out of nowhere, because up until then, she didn't get to do anything. Like, they didn't develop her or even try, and it's such a shame. And I don't know what the fuck they're going to do with Nick Fury going forward. Maybe they'll try and explain away his behavior here as him being some kind of variant from an alternate universe or something that got fucking slapped into this movie. Because I don't know what the fuck their plan is. They turned him into comic relief, purely just comic relief and nothing else, which is such a wild decision. Anyway, plugging the Marvels into the moist meter, I'm going to have to give it like a 25%. It is the messiest MCU movie that has been made. I think I can comfortably say that. Just, I'm still shocked that it released in this current state that it's in. That's really about it. It's not looking great for the MCU going forward here. I don't know how they bounce back. I don't know what direction they even take the MCU anymore. But I guess we'll just have to see. That's it. See ya.